Welcome to Coach Taylor's class videos, and today we're going to talk about writing exponential equations. So yesterday we talked about our basic exponential equation, and we talked about y equals a times b to the x. Remember that our a is our y-intercept. Remember that our b is our rate, and the way that we find our rate is we're going to go y2 divided by y1. And that's all I can really think of right now. So first, let's try to remember some basic ideas. So this graph, because it goes up to the right, is going to be a growth graph, which means our b is going to be greater than 1. Because this is a exponential equation, I know that this is only going to keep going that way, and this one's going to only keep going that way. So my domain, which is my x value, is going to be all real numbers, which tells me that my range, I know that this line is never going to go below the x-axis, so my range is going to be y is greater than 0. And then finally, I also know that my asymptote is the line that it never crosses, so it's never going to cross the x-axis, so that equation of that line is y equals 0. So now let's get into how we write our equation of our graph. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find our a, because again, our equation is y equals a parentheses b to the x. Our a is our y-intercept. And so we're looking at our y-axis, which is right here. And we want to see, where does this line cross the y-axis? And it crosses it at 5. So the next thing that we want to do, and this is what's really different about exponentials versus linear, is when we find our b, it has to be 2 points right in a row, and not necessarily points. We're looking at where it crosses the x-axis. So if I use my y-intercept of 5 as my y1, I then have to follow my line all the way to where it crosses the x-axis at 1, and that's going to be my y2. Sometimes in exponentials, that's going to be a whole number. Sometimes in exponentials, it's going to be a fraction or a decimal. So in this case, my y2 is 10, and my y1 is 5. So I need to do 10 divided by 5, sorry guys. So my b is going to be 2. So now I'm ready to write my equation. So I'm going to go y equals, next is our a, which we said in 5 is 5. Then we go parentheses, our b, which is 2. And the most important part is we have to put that x there for the exponent. All right, so let's look at this equation, or this graph. So again, our equation is y equals a times b to the x. So we need to find our a first. So again, we look at the y-axis. So where does this line cross the y-axis? So it crosses it at 2. By looking at this graph, I know that my b is going to be a decimal because it's a decay, because it's decreasing or getting lower as we go to the right. So our b is going to be y2 divided by y1. Now, when we have a decay graph, what we've got to understand is because it's decaying, we're going to end up with fractions on the right side. So instead of making my y-intercept y1, I'm going to go to the left, find that first value, which is -1, and I'm going to make this one y1, and then I'm going to make my y-intercept y2. So my 2 is going to go on top, my 6 is going to go on bottom, and then we need to simplify that fraction to 1/3. And again, because it's decay, I know I'm going to have a fraction or a decimal for my rate. It's got to be less than 1. So now we write our equation. Y equals, my y-intercept or my a is 2, my rate or my ratio is 3. And again, the most important part is you have to put the x as the exponent of your b. All right, so now let's look at tables. So quickly, we need to remind ourselves that f of x is the same thing as y. We need to find our a value. So when we're looking at, so we said y-intercept is a, when we're looking at a table, our y-intercept is always going to be when x equals 0. So we're going to look through our x values, find where x is 0, and whatever y is when x equals 0, that is going to be my y-intercept. So in this equation, my y is going to be 8. Now we need to find our b, which is y2 divided by y1. Now, you can use any two values on this table, but the catch is they have to be in a row. So we have to have -2, -1, we have to have -1 and 0, or we have to have 0 and 1. So they have to be right in a row. So I'm going to pick the smallest numbers because that makes for the easiest math. So I'll make that y1 and make this one y2. So my b is going to equal 4 over 2. And what we notice is as we're going down our table, this is increasing. So because it's increasing, we know it's going to be a growth graph. So I know that my b has got to be greater than 1. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. And now I can write my equation. So y equals 8 parentheses 2 to the x. All right, again, we know that f of x is the same thing as y. We know that when we look for our a or our y-intercept, we're looking for when x is 0. So we're going to scan down. And so we know that our a equals 12. So as we look at this table, we notice that it is decreasing. And because it's decreasing, we know we're going to be decay. So we know that our b is going to be a decimal or a fraction. So b equals y2 over y1. So again, we have to use two numbers that are in a row for this to work. I don't really want to use 192. I really don't want to use 48 either. So I'm going to make 12 my y1 and make 3 my y2. So we're going to put our 3 on top, and then we're going to put our 12 on bottom. So you can always plug this fraction into your calculator or into Desmos, and it will simplify it for you. So 3 divided by 12. So we know our b equals 1/4. And so now we're ready to write our equation. So y equals, our a is 12, our b is 1/4. And again, the most important thing to put is make sure that we have our x as our exponent. And that is how we write equations of exponential functions.